Welcome. Our church invites you to join us for an omnistic view of this week's topic, the origins of Samhain and Halloween.
Welcome to this week's meeting of STSS, Spiritual Truth Seekers and Searchers. Today we are talking about the origins of Halloween and Samhain. So first, I'd just like to ask, what does everybody know about the origins of Halloween or Samhain? What do you think about when you think of, where did it come from?
How far am I going back?
All the way.
So in the early pagan religion, it was to hide your faces from spirits without could mean you harm. It was believed that the veil between the spiritual realm and earth was extremely weak at that time. So demons and ghosts and gods would walk among us. So wearing masks protected you from their ire.
Okay, very nice. A lot of times when you ask that, what do people know about Halloween, a lot of people know that it did stem from an old pagan tradition, but they might not really know details about it. They know that, like Chance said, that it's a time when the veil between the worlds is thinner, so it makes communicating with the other side easier and things like that. So it has its roots back in the Celtic religion. It's a holiday for the Celtic religion. It looks like Samhain or something like that, but it's pronounced Samhain, and it is the celebration that is the end of summer and the beginning of winter. So it celebrates the end of the harvest season, and it goes into the darker time of the year, so the nights are longer, the days are shorter, the coldness comes in, plants die to be reborn later. All of this life cycle contributes to the association with death. But it's all a cycle of death and rebirth, and that's what they celebrate with Samhain, is that cycle of death approaching. And they would make offerings to the sun god and stuff, praying that he would come back in the spring and bring everything back to life. Okay, because it was a harvest celebration, the food was very, very plentiful because they had just finished the harvest. They had an abundance of fruits and vegetables. They also knew, most of the people who raised cattle and stuff like that knew that they couldn't afford to feed the animals all through the winter as well. So not only was there an abundance of fruits and vegetables, but an abundance of meat as well, because they would go ahead and cull the herds. So it was a time for great feasting. So as we said, the veil between the worlds was thinner, or is thinner, at this time of year. So because of that, it made lots of things in the magical realm more accessible, divination practices and stuff, because it makes it easier to communicate with the other side during this liminal period of time. So the two worlds, the other world is believed to be where the ancestors are, the old gods, and the fairy folk. All of that is considered in the other world, and that's the world that, with the liminal space and the thin veil, that we have more access to. So whatever you believe in might be on the other side. All of those were different things that the Celtics believed were right there and easier to access during this time. So, as he was saying, during this time of Samhain, those beings could cross through to our world and walk among us. And because they did that, the people would dress up in disguise or costumes so that the others would think that they were one of them, that they were a creature too. So it was like spiritual camouflage. So if you weren't recognized as being human, then the other world people wouldn't mess with you. The other creatures would leave you alone. So they started wearing these disguises, and it's called guising or mumming. The Celtic traditions, so they would go guising in disguise, and they would have a big communal bonfire. That was one of the big things, which interestingly, the term bonfire comes from bone fire, because there were lots of sacrifices and bones within this big communal bonfire. So that's where the word comes from. But they would extinguish the fires in their homes, and then go to the big communal bonfire, where the smoke was perceived to purify any negative energy from the last year and offer protection for the new year. So yeah, they would extinguish the fires in their own house, go to the communal bonfire, and put out their offerings or sacrifices, get purified. Them and their animals would get purified by the smoke, all of that. And then they would, at the end, they would take some of the embers or a torch home from that communal fire to relight their own hearth fires at home. It was very symbolic, because this communal fire has like the protective elements, and then they're taking it home. So if they didn't have a torch, they would use this abundance of fruits and vegetables to carry some embers in from the fire.
I think the
So
first
that's
jack-o'-lantern was a turnip, if I remember
Yes.
correctly.
Turnips are one of the very popular ones. And of course, if it's enclosed, there's not enough oxygen getting in, and the fire could go out. So carving holes in it, is helpful to keep the fire lit as it gets home. So they started carving it, and faces just went along with the whole chasing away the dead and stuff like that. Another interesting thing about the bonfires is, like, Samhain was one of the biggest times for the bonfires, and this huge fire would draw bats. People never saw the bats in the daytime, and there was no electricity then. So that's one of the reasons that bats became associated with Halloween and Samhain, because they could see them by the light of the fire when you couldn't see them any other time. So I thought that was a pretty cool little fun fact.
I'm sure they look like winged demons to them to begin with. I'm sure they look like winged demons to them to begin with, because they've never seen them before.
Okay. So later on in time, the Roman Empire began to take over a lot of sections of the world. They began to take over the Celtic lands, and they have their own religious beliefs and spirituality. But as they take over the lands that they conquered, the beliefs and cultures start to mesh and entwine. So some of the festivals that the Romans had before they took over the Celtic lands were the Roman Feralia Festival, which was held in February 21st. And this is 9 days of honoring and appeasing the dead with offerings at graves such as wreaths, grain, wine-soaked bread, and violets. And then the Lemuria Festival was May 9th, 11th, and 13th, so like every other day for 3 days. And that was held to appease spirits of the dead, such as improperly buried or restless dead ancestors who could bring misfortune or cause illness. So between these two festivals, even though they were held at different times of the year, the beliefs were very in line with the Celtic beliefs of Samhain. These festivals, their influence got brought over to the lands, and they just kind of meshed and intertwined, and they adopted some of the Roman culture, the Romans adopted some of theirs, and their beliefs already entwined about, honoring the dead and fearing the dead as well. So it just all meshed really well in terms of spirituality for things like that. Another festival that the Romans held was the Roman festival of Pomona. So Pomona is a goddess of fruits and orchards and abundance, particularly apples. She's very often portrayed with apples. And that festival and that goddess inspired a lot of things to do with apples that now coincide with Halloween and Samhain. They would tie apples to branches or put them on wreaths as an offering for the gods and the goddesses. And of course, modern times will tie apples from a string, and people will try to get the apple or bobbing for apples in a bucket of water and stuff like that. All that came about because they were courtship rituals. Because this time of year the veil is thinned, it's a great time for divination. So if they were bobbing for apples, they might write the name of the suitor on the bottom of the apple, and whichever apple you get is who it would be, your future spouse. The young girls would try to peel an apple in one long strip, swing it around their head 3 times, and then throw it behind them. And whatever letter it looked like was the letter of your future spouse's name. They would do things like take hazelnuts and put them next to each other in the fire. And if they roasted peacefully next to each other, that was considered like a good omen. But if they popped and crackled and jumped away from each other, that was a bad omen. So all these little courtship games came into place, and they were played on Samhain because it's the best time for divination. So that the apple stuff is one of those things that carried into the future but has its roots back in this time. Okay, so for the Christian influences now.
They're fun.
Skipping ahead a little bit. So 609 AD. Lemuria, which was that 3-day festival. The Roman festival was adopted as May 13th. So where it was 9th, 11th, and 13th, they said it's going to be the 13th. We're going to make it the one day. And changed the name of it to the Feast Day of All Martyrs. Mm-hmm. So this is what the church did. The church said, okay, Lemuria is going to be on the 13th, and we're going to change the name to the Feast Day of All Martyrs. So the Catholic martyrs that were persecuted and killed and whatever, they're going to honor them on this day. At the time, the Pope also dedicated the Roman Pantheon to the Virgin Mary and different martyrs. So he took something that had been dedicated to other gods and goddesses for a long time, and he dedicated it to these Christian gods.
Yep.
So that was a smooth transition.
Right.
So for a long time.
And not read he didn't just add his thing.
For a long
Well,
time, they
no.
worshipped in secret. It was a big thing back then that you would outface Christianity. It was very prevalent to worship Jesus and God in the daylight, and then do your more pagan rituals at night. It was
So the difference here with the Christian influence and their holiday of the martyrs was, instead of fearing the dead or trying to hide from them, they just wanted to honor the dead. So that was the main difference in how they saw the holiday, was the focus of how they felt about the dead. So this is occurring in May. Fast forward 200 years, so in the 800s AD, they decided that, okay, this is working, but if we move this day from May 13th to November 1st, we can get those pagans converted. So they took the day and they moved it to November 1st, and they called it All Saints Day. Another name for All Saints Day is All Hallows Day. So November 1st in the 800s is now called All Saints Day, or All Hallows Day. So then that worked out for a little while, and then they started saying, well, let's give honor to the dead that wasn't saints. Let's give honor to all the dead, just the regular people that have died as well. So November 2nd became All Souls Day. So now we have Samhain, All Saints Day, All Souls Day on the 31st, 1st, and 2nd. During All Souls Day, of course, the Catholic Church believes in purgatory. So if a soul was trapped in purgatory, they could get released from there and ascend if they had enough people praying for them.
This is a little bit before you could bribe your way into heaven.
And it kind of aligns with how they feel with the Day of the Dead. They believe that, they're out and they're about, and people who don't have their pictures put on mantles or remembered don't get remembered and fade away.
Los de la Muerte is a direct thing.
It's your ancestors.
Combining within Samhain and Catholicism, because in Mexico they had both the Aztec, Mayan, and Christian people coming in, and it's just the melting pot that is those religions together. It's why they do the whole skulls things, and it's a party, but they do talk to the dead. It's very much a huge melting pot between those three different factors.
Well, one of the ways that the Catholic parishioners would get more souls for their dead ancestors and relatives is they would have these, usually like adolescent teenage boys, but different people, but most commonly adolescent boys would come around to the doors, and they would offer prayers in exchange for treats. So they began making these little cakes that they call soul cakes. And they were made with like cinnamon, nutmeg, raisins, molasses. So they, like I said, they call them soul cakes, and they got them in exchange for going door to door and offering prayers for the departed. So this became a big thing on All Souls Day. So another thing that they would do at this time is more the older people continued guising and mumming, getting dressed up in costume, and they would go door to door putting on plays and shows and things of that nature, kind of like carolers do at Christmas time now. They would go around, put on a little show, and people would give them things in return. So treats, money, whatever.
Yep.
So that was kind of a precursor to future events way back then.
They were called mummers farces. And
Mummers what?
farces. Mummers farces. That's how you get the term Mother's farce. It's a play upon something. It's pretending to do something, and that's where that term comes from. Is that
On November 5th, 1605, Guy Fawkes in London tried to blow up the House of Lords with explosives, tried to blow it up. He failed. He got caught.
he had a point?
He got the death penalty. They killed him. They burned his body and all of that. However, every year after that, the people would make fun of that by causing mayhem in the streets and just a lot of nonsense and mischief. So this is November 5th. So after Guy Fawkes, they still call it Guy Fawkes Day or Mischief Night in London, but this is now November 5th. So we've got the 31st being Halloween,
We got a whole week going.
Samhain,
Yeah.
All Saints Day, All Souls Day, and then 3 days later we've got Guy Fawkes Day. So all of these days are combining within that same week that are feeding off of each other.
So what's that mean? As a church, we're going to go toilet paper people's houses on November 5th? I need to pencil it in. If so.
Actually, it was always the night before Halloween.
Well,
for
that's
you, not for them. This
Yeah.
is London.
and that's just it though. Over time, the mayhem was getting out of hand. So people were getting hurt. They were setting fires to things. They would sabotage the tram tracks and derail the trains, and people were dying and stuff like that. So over time, it went from just mischief and pranks to really, really bad.
People always
Stuff.
take it too far. There's always those people
Yep.
that take it too far.
So the drunken beggars would also go around. They'd get drunk and they'd cause mischief. And they learned from watching the other geysers and stuff that, hey, this idea of masks and stuff, they won't know who I am. So they embraced the idea of masks and the costumes as well, because they could cause their drunken revelry and mischief without getting caught as easy. So you got another class of people now grabbing on to the things that they're seeing. Okay, then we get into the Protestant Reformation. So the Protestants came into power. They disagreed with a lot of the Catholic Church. The Puritan influence got in there. They don't believe in purgatory. So those prayers from All Souls Day that people were making to get people out of purgatory started to become less and less important, because there's less people praying for those souls now because they didn't believe that. So now it's starting to lose a little bit of traction that it had gained in this week. But people really enjoyed making trouble in some aspects of it. So, of course, we know that the Puritans and the Protestant Reformation, it all brought about the witch trials, and witches were demonized and all of this. They're demonizing all of these things that they didn't necessarily believe in, and they didn't want other people, so they made everyone feel like heretics, because talking about these dead souls and this other world, it was all heresy. You shouldn't be talking about that. It's evil. Where before this, even the Catholics, none of it was evil. It was just death and renewal, the cycle of life, and giving acknowledgement to people that died. It's part of all of our lives. It was never meant to be evil, and it never was until the Protestant Puritan movement decided it was.
It was just an elaborate way to torture people.
So yeah, to get rid of who they didn't want.
Right, it was their way of steering the people to what they wanted.
That's a big
Just
part.
another form of whitewashing or Christian washing.
That's why they took out parts they don't like and
No,
divorced the parts.
humanity repeats itself. We do it all the time. We're doing it now. Like it's just a thing.
So the eventually all this stuff made it over to America, to the colonies. However, the colonies were mostly run by these Puritans, and it didn't really take off. In the rural areas, it kind of caught on a little, but very minor. However, eventually, America got a big influx of immigrants, mostly Scotch and Irish immigrants. And when they came to America, they were very much embracing the holiday and all the fun and the trouble that went with it. So they brought all of those traditions over. The carving of turnips that they have done forever, they brought that over. But when they got here, they found that there's this big orange fruit that's bigger.
So much easier to carve.
So much easier, softer to carve. We can put a bigger candle in it. It's awesome.
It's already hollow.
And easier to carve than a turnip. So we started carving pumpkins. But that was when they brought it to America.
Yep.
But they also brought all the mischief night stuff and the rock throwing and stuff like that. So
and again, at this time they were loosely Catholic. Again, they were still very much Tuatha De Danann, worshiping by night, Christianity by day, and then they became more Catholic, probably second or third generation in America, just from exposure.
So we've got jack-o'-lanterns now because they discovered pumpkins and how easy they are to carve faces into. And there's a story about Stingy Jack.
He tricked the devil twice. Once in a bar, he said, "I want to drink before I go to hell." So they drank a drink together, and he asked the devil to pay. And the devil didn't have money, of course. So he's like, "Turn yourself into a coin, I'll pay the tab, and I'll go to hell with you." The devil turned himself into a coin, he placed him in his pocket with a crucifix, so the devil could not turn back. So he said, "Alright, give me 10 years, and I'll let you free." So the devil agreed, he let him go. Similarly, he comes back 10 years later. Jack is out by a fruit tree, and he says, "Man, it'd be real nice to get a bite to eat before I go to hell. Why don't you climb up that tree? I won't do anything this time, and grab us some fruit to eat." The devil climbs up the tree, and while the devil climbs up the tree, Jack places crucifixes all around the tree, so the devil can't climb back down. He says, "Alright, I'll let you go this time, if you promise to never take me to hell." So as things do, the devil promised, and as things do, Jack eventually dies. He goes to the pearly gates, and they refuse him entry. They said, "You don't belong here, you've been a terrible man all your life. You belong down under." So he goes to hell. The devil says, "Oh no, Jack, we made a deal. You can't come to hell." "Well, what am I to do?" "You know, I like you, Jack, and because of that, I will give you an ember to guide you in between worlds." But like that is the original tale that I was told about Jack.
So ghost stories that we think of became popular in America after the Civil War because there was a lot of soldiers that never came home. So people started telling ghost stories kind of as a way of hope that their people would come home in some form or another. So that's kind of, evolved into a Halloween thing as well, but that's the origin of ghost stories.
Also,
So as we said, the mayhem was getting out of hand, the damage, people getting hurt, people dying, and the society got together and they said we need to do something. We can't just keep letting this go every year. We need to do something to fix this because it's out of hand. So they in the 1930s they started having parades, events, festivals, all of this kind of stuff, things to give the kids something to do other than causing trouble. So they did that for a few years, and it seemed to be working. Things were finally kind of getting on a track where people weren't getting hurt. The mischief was getting a little more in hand, but they needed a little something more. So they started thinking about the past and what's worked and, old traditions. And they said, well, let's try to buy off these little pranksters that are egging my house and toilet paper in my trees. Let's give them baked goods. And they would make popcorn balls and candy apples and things like this. And trick or treat was begun. And that's what it was. It was a bribe. It was a payoff to keep these kids from tricking or pranking you.
It worked.
It did work. And then the Depression hit, and Halloween kind of stopped temporarily because of the sugar shortages.
Nobody could afford,
Yeah. But as soon as the war was over and the restrictions on sugar were lifted, the candy companies got involved and mass produced individually wrapped candies.
Yeah.
And
so taking your
people
money.
embraced that. They also started putting Halloween events on TV, like Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin was one of the first ones. The Halloween Michael Myers movie, that all helped bring it into the mainstream. And they started like mass producing costumes and masks as well. And it just evolved into this more secular Halloween commercialized holiday. But the fact is that it is a spiritual holiday, and no matter what you believe or who you believe in, death is a part of life. It's all part of our cycle, and we shouldn't forget those that have moved on. We should still honor them, talk to them. I strongly believe you should still talk to them.
That's why I like the Day of the Dead celebrations. A lot of times they'll have picnics on the graves of their loved ones, just spend time with them, or they'll have a pitcher and a candle and give them some of their favorite scotch or whatever.
Does that mean you're gonna
Well,
come
and-
see me since you like it?
And some Christians claim that, it's a non-Christian holiday, it's the devil's holiday and stuff like that. But that's absolutely not true as well, because the Catholics embraced it. It's just the Protestant movement didn't embrace it. But the Christians did. And not only did they embrace it, they kind of stole some of it so they could convert the pagans easier. So we had Samhain, which fell the day before All Hallows Day, so they started calling it Hallow Eve, and eventually that turned into Halloween. So that's how we got from Samhain to Halloween. So whether you are setting out to have a happy Halloween this year or a blessed Samhain, I hope you have a great one.
Thank you so much for joining us here at STSS, an omnistic church that believes that there is some truth in every religion and that our spiritual beliefs don't need to fit into any one box. Join us every week for a new discussion on a different topic. Please help our church grow by giving us a subscribe, like, or share, and let us know in the comments your views on today's discussion or what you would like to hear us cover in the future. Every comment and share helps. See you next week.